Welcome to the Global News Podcast from the BBC. Hello, I'm Oliver Conway. And today I'm joined by Tania Kharchenko. And Tania, you have uncovered some terrible stories of abuse of Ukrainian civilians in secret jails in Russian-occupied Ukraine and over the border in Russia itself. First of all, tell us about these detention centres.
Well, actually, for Ukrainians inside of Ukraine, it's not a news even. A lot of civilians are kept in those detention centers for years and years. And their relatives are trying to sometimes to understand whether they are even alive or not. What we did with this investigation, we found survivors who were in such detention centers and who survived the tortures and sexual violence in some of the cases. And we also checked the open sources to see the statements of other survivors. And we were able to establish that there are approximately 93 such centers in occupied territories of Ukraine and 102 in Russia where Ukrainian civilians were held. And we are talking about time frame of research from 2023 to 2025. So that is the data from those years.
And who are the people who are being held in these centres and how did they end up there?
Oh, there are so many different stories how people end up in those centers. So one of the characters, like leading character in our documentary, Liudmyla Husseinova, she was engineer on a poultry farm in Novoazovsk in Donetsk Oblast, which was occupied, and several years after the occupation in 2019, she was arrested. She was working as a volunteer because a lot of Ukrainians who are staying on occupied territories, they were trying to support the Ukrainian armed forces, or she was also helping to orphanages, to kids who didn't have support after the occupation. So she would send some food or, shoes. And for that help, she received the flag from Ukrainian soldiers, and they left signatures there. She shared that picture among trusted friends, and somehow it probably ended up in the wrong hands. So she was arrested, and after that brought to a notorious prison in Donetsk, which called Izolyatsiya. And, that is her story. After that, she spent in detention for more than 3 years. There are other stories of people who were in occupation in Kherson and they ended up in Kherson detention center. In last years since full-scale invasion, I had conversations with a lot of Ukrainian civilians. One of them was math teacher. She was abducted, kidnapped basically from, I think it was Kyiv region as far as I remember. And then she was brought to Russian prison where she was subjected to terrible tortures.
Tell us more about Liudmyla. She was basically just bundled off the street, taken to one of these centres, and what happened to her there?
So when she was brought there, she was, searched. There were comments made, sexualized comments about her body. Liudmyla was eventually brought to her cell and she wanted to cry, but one of the inmates, female inmate, told her, don't you dare to do that. They are watching us all the time and whoever cries will be beaten. So there are very strict rules in Izolyatsiya where if somebody from guards enters the cell, prisoners are supposed to wear the bags on their heads. They are not allowed to sit or to lay in their bed. They have to stand up. The light for hours and hours and hours. Obviously, the light doesn't go off even during the night. And then she describes that there in the documentary and her interviews, she says that she has never heard such terrible screaming as she heard there because, people who are survivors from Izolyatsiya, there are other survivors we interviewed in documentary. They're talking about sexualized torture. So one of the characters, Ruslan Shaiter, told us that he was tortured for several months, including the electrocution of genitals. They are threatened that they can be raped or their family can be brought in Izolyatsiya and can be raped as well. in some of the cases, they said that they learned this new habit of listening who is tortured in hope that those are not their relatives, you know. For Liudmyla, she was sexually assaulted in Izolyatia, and later she was transferred to another prison. She was still in prison during full-scale invasion in 2022, and then later she returned in exchange in prisoner swap.
And the UN has said that torture of civilians at these places is systematic and widespread. What more can you tell us about that?
Well, we see that that started with the beginning of the war in 2014, and I would say it was brought to the conscious of the Western world or reported more widely after full-scale invasion when we saw what was happening in Kherson and other regions. But the system works, and it's the main rule of that system is subjecting civilians, especially political detainees, to terrible tortures in order to break them.
And who are the people who are carrying out this torture?
As one of our characters, again in documentary, Ruslan Shaiter, describes on the example Izolyatia, he says that Izolyatia wasn't created by Putin, it was created by regular people. And there were Russian soldiers in charge of Izolyatia as guards and also Ukrainian collaborators. So one of perpetrators we investigated in documentary is Yermak. He's Ukrainian collaborator. It's his call name, and he was a person who tortured Liudmyla in the way when he came and saw her for the first time. She was informed that he is coming inside of the cell, so she wore the bag on her head, so she wasn't able to see him, but she knew who he is because there were a lot of people were talking about him as one of the most violent people there in Izolyatia. So Yermak basically, he asked Liudmyla whether she is supporting Ukraine, and she said that she supports justice, and that was the moment when he violently started beating her. And later, when he saw that she is on hunger strike because she lost some weight, he told her that for her they will cook special food, and then they brought raw food mixed with cabbage. She was forced to eat it in front of CCTV camera, so they were watching her doing that. Basically, they're watching all inmates in Izolyatia all of the time, which doesn't give them any privacy whatsoever. And so she, one of her friends told her in that cell that she can hide, that pretend that she eats, but split it out. She was trying to do that, but she says that the taste of that food will stay with her forever.
And how were you able to identify this man?
Well, actually, in case of Yermak, Bellingcat did their research before, and other survivor from Izolyatia, Ukrainian journalist Aseyev, was helping them with testimony about Yermak's role in Izolyatia as well. So when we learned from Liudmyla that one of her cases, when like the situation which I described happened with Yermak, we checked information about him, checked that from his social networks, we were able to establish where he approximately lives. We cannot confirm whether he still works in Izolyatia or not, but it looks like he still lives in the area, and some pictures from his social network suggest that he was like having quite good time in occupied Crimea on holidays with his family. So what surprises a lot of people, but it's still probably, in a lot of stories about people who commit crimes, there is always this like normal side of them. So it's quite interesting to see the testimonies of survivors and then to check the regular, like happy family pictures and to see that they also live this normal life.
And what did the Russian authorities say about these detention centres?
They didn't reply about the, allegations about the number of civilians in detention centres. It mostly was about the documentation of the crimes and that they are on the side of the law and that the responsible authorities monitor the situation. But earlier, when UN was added Russia to the blacklist of countries responsible for conducting or committing sexual violence crimes during the conflict, the Russian representative in UN, he accused organization in being biased, and just like he said that they are trying to portray Russia as a villain. So that's it. Yeah.
Tania, thank you. Tania Kharchenko, reporter who has uncovered those appalling stories. If you'd like to hear more from the Global News podcast, click the link below. But thanks for watching.